Hey everybody. Yesterday while I was looking at my analytics, I saw that someone came upon my channel when they searched for what do you need to know before moving out on your own? And I thought that would be a very good idea for a video. I present to you the top 5 things you need to know before you move out on your own. Number 1, you need to know how much you can afford regarding rent and bills. So for the ease of the math, let's pretend you're paying $1,000 a month for your rent. Your very first question should be, what is included with it? I have never heard of anyone including your cell phone. I have had multiple places offer to pay for my internet/TV. There are even some buildings that have special deals with our cable company locally here that get cheaper and more channels, cheaper packages with more channels than other people would. And that's just because everybody in that building can only subscribe to that company. So it works out for them in the end because they end up making more money, even though they're making less on each of the packages. Things like water, power, and heat can also be included. They're not always the same thing. It might seem to you that they are, but it depends on where you live and who your provider is. One of the towns I've lived in before has 2 totally different providers, and they each service certain sections of the town. So you have to go into both of their websites, put in your address, and see which one can service your address. Now, the next question should be whether or not you have to pay a deposit. Because of my previous employment history, specifically with the local police force, I have not paid a deposit more than once. There's been people are just like, meh, whatever, you work for the police, you're totally harmless, I'm sure, don't worry about it. Here in British Columbia, at least, you are required to pay half a month's rent before you move in. That's your deposit. The landlord is required to keep it in an interest accruing account and must give you that money back with the interest that it accrued at the end of the year or at the end of the term or whenever it is that you finally move out. Now, they are not required to give that back to you if you do any damage to their home. Some places, like other provinces in Canada, for example, have a rule that you have to pay your entire rent up front, plus another full month's rent. So basically they call it first and last month's rent, but really it's the first month's rent with the deposit. If nothing is included with your rent at all, it's always a good idea to ask your landlord what the other previous tenants before you had to pay. Usually they have a pretty good idea. If it's a large building, they're usually quite aware of how much each unit has to pay for heat or power or water or, whatever. So they can tell you ahead of time, okay, well, the people in this unit only paid, say, $70 a month for their power, but didn't pay hardly anything for water because they were almost never home. Now, are you going to be home all the time? Then you should probably save up a little bit more. For water specifically, I have lived in some apartments where the water was metered. So I had to be careful about how long my showers were, how many times a week I ran my dishwasher, which is really only ever one time a week, but it was still something I had to think about just because it's just that much more money that you have to pay, right? And then other times water was completely included. And in the case of 2 of my apartments in Calgary, water was the heat. So they paid for water, which means I also didn't pay for heat. So I could keep it super hot if I wanted to. Because in Alberta, for some reason, I don't know why we don't do this in BC, but they have radiators. So it was kind of weird. Like if any water gets into that line, it is so loud. I could just chase the bubbles around because I could tell where they were going. It was crazy. But anyway, now that we figured out what the base minimum cost is to live month to month, you need to know how much of a deposit or a fee will be charged for your utility setup. So the very first month that you want to hook up, if you have no history with the utility companies, they may require a larger amount up front just in case you don't pay the bill on time. If it so happens where you do have history, then you likely won't need a deposit at all unless you've missed a couple of payments, in which case, they'll negotiate with you. I had a roommate once who had a previous roommate situation. There was, I think, 5 of them in the house. And he came to me with a bill that was about $800. He couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to give him the money. We had agreed previously that he would be the one to get the power hooked up because he had that history of paying everything on time. I had never had power hooked up because it was the first time I'd lived in this area. So for the first month, while we were both saving up money, we had to have more blankets. We had to burn tons of candles, and we didn't have power. So I had to go to, or I'm sorry, we had power, but we didn't have heat. So I had to go to the gym and shower there first before work. And if I was cold or whatever and I couldn't get to sleep, I'd go back there and have another warm shower before they closed so that I could come home and go to sleep. That was also incidentally the first apartment I've ever had where I discovered that if you use a really, really, really old lighter, there is a chance that it will just start on fire for no reason. That's happened to me. Didn't know that was possible. Absolutely is. It's the best possible way to avoid a surprise like that. You don't want that. You want to make sure you have enough so that you can get your power hooked up. You want to make sure you have enough so that you can get your internet hooked up. A lot of things you need to do. The best possible thing you can do is just email each of the companies or look on their website and put in your address and see how much they will charge you. And they'll usually have a policy that you can read that says, like, if you're this age, you've never had this before, we charge whatever, $200, $300, $400, maybe it's $20. I don't know. Just depends. So it's worth taking a couple minutes to look that up. You need to know your billing cycles. So when is your power due? Just because you got hooked up on the first doesn't necessarily mean that your bill is always going to be due on the first. There have been many times when I have gone to, let's just say, pay my internet bill. And even though I got it hooked up on the first when I moved in, it wasn't due until the 18th. But that full 2 months worth, just because of the, again, advanced billing, was due. So you need to know when you're getting paid versus when your bills are due. So here in Canada, there's several different ways people pay. One is either the full amount at the end of the month or the 15th and the last day of the month, which I really liked because I had all of my bills set up so that the last day of the month was when rent came out, which is exactly when rent should come out. And then the 15th was when I made all of my bills due. I changed everything to say, can we change the billing cycle so that I can, have it come out on this day? That doesn't work when you get paid bi-weekly. You really have to pay attention to what is coming due versus when you're getting paid. Very, very important. The stress that I went through trying to figure that out at first was awful. And I've never struggled with it since because I've finally mastered how to do it after, 25 years of living by myself. So finally, before moving out on your own, you need to know whether you have everything you're going to need. And if not, how much is it going to cost to buy it? When I lived with my mom, I was allowed to bring my bed with me. Not every parent would allow that. Some people would be like, well, no, we're going to use your room as a guest room, or we're going to keep your room exactly the same way it is. You have to buy all new stuff. Do you have things that are pretty important for the first couple of weeks, like bowls, frying pans, pots, cutlery, a shower curtain, garbage can, garbage bags, any kind of normal staple that you might have now where you live, but that won't be coming with you to the new place. So like simple things, salt and pepper, various spices, pasta, anything like that. A water filter. I don't know. It all depends on where you live as to what you're going to need. Pretty standard things though, like shower curtain, place to sit. I've used my bed more than once as a couch because I either couldn't afford to get something new or what was available to me wasn't what I wanted or anything like that. So those can be really quite important to plan ahead. I personally prefer to thrift as much as I possibly can. There's a few things I won't because of cleanliness reasons. One is a vacuum. You just don't know what the previous owners used that vacuum for. Was it, there went my light. Were they using it to do things like vacuum up cat litter? What if you're allergic to cats? You don't know. So it's better to get a new vacuum. Same thing with towels, like bath towels and whatnot. A lot of people don't wash their towels, not only on a regular basis, but don't wash it with hot water to try and blitz that bacteria away. So you don't know what you're getting when you buy somebody else's previously used towel. In that case, I buy new because I just can't. I can't. And finally, the last thing is, of course, toilet brushes. You need one. Typically what I do is when I move to a new place, which I try not to do very often anymore, but was something I did multiple times per year, is get a new toilet brush when you move to the new place. Sometimes you have to replace it before that, and that's fine. It is plastic, and I don't love the use of it, but you can't sanitize that kind of plastic. So you have to throw it out. That's just the world we live in right now. There's nothing you can do about it. Of course, you have to have a place to put your clothing, a microwave, little things that you need to help you limp along in the first couple of weeks of living by yourself until you can afford to not only pay all your bills on time, but also budget to buy other things that you might need. There you have it. Did I leave anything out? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like. If you loved it, I would love it if you would subscribe. It really does help the algorithm. It tells YouTube that you're interested in this kind of content and that you want more. And that's all I got for you. I hope you have a great week.